Good morning. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the President and CEO of ECG Management Consultants, Chris Collins. And I want to spend a few minutes with Chris this morning. Chris, thank you for giving me the time to just give you an overview of a project I just wrapped up, which was really, I thought, fascinating, where I interviewed 6 different physician CEOs to kind of get their perspective on the current landscape, their journey from the bedside to the corner office, and just their overall impression of what's going on in healthcare. Chris, you and I know lots and lots and lots of CEOs, the vast majority of which are not physicians. So I in no way want to imply that you need to be a physician to be a good CEO. That is not the point of this at all. But Chris, I do think that being one myself, physician CEOs do bring a unique perspective to the corner office. And given how challenging healthcare is right now and how complicated it is, you and I were talking the other day, we can't remember a time in our careers where healthcare in this country has been more challenging and more complex. And I was just curious to hear from these physician CEOs the perspective their clinical background brings to how they make decisions, how they lead their organizations. And the conversations were really quite enjoyable, but I just want to kind of get your impressions, your take before we post these. So again, thanks for taking a few minutes this morning.
No, it's great to see you, Tim. And I'm delighted to be here and what a fascinating topic and thank you for doing it. That slate of leaders is really impressive. First and foremost, regardless of what degree they have, that's an impressive group of leaders. So thank you for doing it. I think there's a lot of interest on this topic. And as you alluded to, it's a sensitive one because someone might think we're drawing a correlation between your degree and your ability to run a health system or hospital. And as you stated, the vast majority do not have physicians as CEOs. And so, but for what it's worth, if you look at Fortune 500 companies, only half of which have master's degrees. So we can go and poke around other sectors and look at that correlation. But first and foremost, it was fascinating to hear the perspectives of those leaders, including the what I've learned from you and you being a leader at Lifespan for so long as a physician leader. And I would agree that it is important, right? Let's talk out of both sides of our mouth. To scrub in for a surgery or to see a patient, to have that unique perspective, is something pretty powerful if you're sitting in the C-suite, right? But at the same time, you'd say, well, running multi-billion-dollar businesses are also super complicated. Thanks to our government and the payers and all that good stuff, with razor thin margins, right? So these are businesses that need to be run, and real quickly, it's I don't know if you've seen this, but if you go back in the late 1800s up until about 1930, vast majority of hospitals were run by physicians because they were small, mission-based, healthcare-centric entities, right? And so it's interesting where we've come,
Right.
And so I'd love to hear more about what your perspectives as you pull back all the information that you gathered from those interviews. But it's a great topic.
Yeah,
What
thank you.
actually led you to roll out of bed and say, I have an idea, I'm going to go try to round up some CEOs that were MDs to get their perspective?
Yeah, great question. A couple things. One, again, I've been doing this a long time, like you've been doing this a long time, 40 plus years, both as a clinician and as a health system CEO. And I honestly can't remember a time where healthcare in this country is more complicated, is more challenging. And I just thought it would be interesting to hear from physician CEOs, how they lead, how they make decisions, given that, their DNA as a physician, but as you point out, they're leading multi-billion-dollar companies. I just thought it'd be fascinating. And these are 6 extraordinary leaders that lead extraordinary organizations. The second, and this is a little bit self-serving, I think you and I have discovered as we do our work with our clients, the relationship between the C-suite and physician leaders has never been more important. And those organizations that are thriving have really excellent relationships. And maybe this is a supposition. I have no proof, but maybe if the CEO happens to be a physician, that's building the bridge halfway with the physician leaders. Physicians, good, bad, or indifferent, and I'm guilty. There's just something about talking to another doctor that builds a level of trust and a level of transparency. So I was curious to see, if they thought that was an advantage to them as they led the organization. And they all had just terrific stories. I hope our listeners will listen to all three. They were all quite different. They all lead different organizations. And what's really interesting is their paths from the bedside to the corner office are all quite different.
Right.
And for some of our colleagues out there and clients who happen to be physicians who may have their sights set on a corner office job someday, I think there's a lot to learn from how they did it.
Yeah, I think there's some studies out there that there over 60% of physicians today that are in some leadership role, over 60% have expressed an interest in becoming a CEO.
Yep.
And I find that fascinating. And I think that even generationally, those that are going to medical school understand the complexity of healthcare and are getting the education and training to understand the business side a little bit more, which is different from your generation, right? In terms of your interest in knowing what a P&L looks like, or the balance sheet, or strategy, or M&A, or whatever. So I think it's going to change. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the focal point should be the relationship between qualified physician leaders and the C-suite, regardless if the CEO has an MD or not.
Yeah, agreed.
Right? And I think that's critically important. And somewhere along the way, space has been created in the average health system. So if you go back, and let's go back to the 30s and go all the way up to present day, honestly, I think that gap has widened for the average system. There are some that are, it's amazing, right? There's just no daylight between the two of them. But in the average system, there is some quiet friction between the physician leaders and the C-suite. And it's not pointing any blame, but there's something there, right? So, but we both know that if you're going to run an efficient business with razor thin margins while ensuring that you're delivering safe, high quality care in a cost efficient manner, you need both perspectives at the table. Because a lot of physician leaders today that are CEOs, it's mixed, right? Maybe they haven't seen a patient in a long time, and they're not seen as, okay, you were an MD long ago, but come on, you've gone over to the other side. You're an executive, so you don't know modern medicine today, right? You're not seeing 40 patients in primary care and then going home and doing your paperwork. I mean, so there's a lot to unpack here. It's multidimensional.
Yeah, there's no question. But what was interesting, and again, as a health system CEO, you're right. You're not reading the New England Journal of Medicine every day. But I made it a point, and all of the interviewees, all 6 of them, made it a point to make sure they were out in the clinical arena at least a couple times a week, talking to doctors, talking to nurses, seeing the technology, what gets in the way of doing your job. And I think we as a physician leader can ask some probing questions that perhaps a finance person wouldn't know to ask. But
Right.
You're right. And then I love what Eric Dixon said. He said, look, I know what I was good at. I know what I wasn't good at. I didn't
Right.
get an MBA. I didn't get, so I surrounded myself by really, really smart people
Exactly.
who knew what I didn't know. I got an MBA, but as you and I joke often, Chris, no one will ever accuse me of being an Excel spreadsheet wizard. It's not my strong suit, but I made damn sure I had one of the best CFOs in the country. So I think you can partner, with folks who have the talent you don't necessarily have.
Yeah, and that's spot on. And as these super systems grow and aggregation continues, the sophistication and just the team around these CEOs. I mean, you have chief strategy officers, chief transformation officers, obviously CFO. You have a lot of talent around that leader. So it comes down to, most importantly, a leader of people and somebody that can build trust and respect of a fellow administrator or a physician or somebody on the frontline staff, and they can lead and have people believe in that vision. And so that probably is most important, right? And I think there are brilliant CEOs in the delivery sector that are both MDs historically and not.
Agreed.
But I think the conversation is a good one because it kind of opens our eyes to and I'm not trying to be overly negative. There is a quiet, kind of call it quiet friction between some of the physician leaders and the C-suite. And I think that we can close that gap. I think there's ways to do that, not just by committees, but by really working on those relationships.
Couldn't agree more. And you're the expert on this. I'm learning this, but I think it's a safe statement to say, we work with a wide variety of clients, big and small, East Coast, West Coast, AMCs, I mean, we cover the gamut. And my impression thus far is the high performing organizations that we work with and help. One of the characteristics is a hand in glove relationship between the physician leaders and the C-suite. Those are the ones that are really working together to take on the challenges. And when there is, as you suggest, a gap or a friction, man, that just adds a degree of difficulty to what we're trying to do that is almost immeasurable.
I couldn't agree more. And you can almost sense it when you step into an organization, you get to know the C-suite and the CEO. You feel whether it's more administrative centric or it's an environment that invites the voice of the physician in a very genuine way. I'm not talking about a little physician advisory committee over to the side where we're going to talk down to it and tell them what we're going to do. I'm talking about opening the door for qualified leaders to sit there and say, whether it's capital allocation or here's a strategy I'm thinking about opening up a new ASC or whatever it is. What are your thoughts? What am I missing? What are the barriers? That is really important. And then once you get aligned on that strategy, the power of those physician leaders to be ambassadors and advocates to the rest of the physician enterprise is immeasurable, right? The opposite of that is pushing down a strategy, and then there's well, why are we doing this, and what's the rationale for it? And that physician leader can't speak to it. That's where it starts to fall down.
I couldn't agree more, and I think you'd agree. One of the things that ECG is quite good at, and we do a lot of work in, is when we go into an organization and we sense that there is that gap, there is that friction. One of our initial to-dos is to try to close that gap, to point it out, to explain it, to talk to the C-suite, to talk to the physician leaders, get the historical perspective, because everybody remembers 15 years when Billy poked Susie in the eye. And I think we're really good at closing those gaps for organizations. And where we've done that, the organization is like, wow, we're performing like we never have before.
Yeah, and I not to be corny about it, but if you zoom out for a minute and you think about the healthcare delivery system, ultimately the reputation of a given health system or hospital is going to be based on the interaction and experience between a patient and a provider, right? That's it right there. It really is. You can put up the nicest facilities and the best tower, and you can have the best brand and all this stuff, the best technology. But ultimately, the experience of that patient, by the way, here's a secret. They don't really want to be in your hospital that long. It's not a resort. They want to go in and get the best care they can get. And that experience between those healthcare professionals, right, that staff and that physician, that's going to define when they go and talk to their friends and family, how is healthcare at XYZ hospital? It's right there. So if you're not pulling in the perspective of those physicians through a qualified leader, I'm not saying you're going to be able to talk to 600 physicians or 1,000 physicians in your system, but if you don't have that perspective, and it's not constant, it could be a real risk reputationally, strategically, financially for the system. So that gap has to close.
Again, you're spot on. And again, I won't name them, but if you think of the top 10, 20 name brand, healthcare systems in the country that everybody would agree, is, that's where I want to go when I get sick. If you put all the buildings up on a slide, you can't distinguish they're all the same. It's
Right.
the people that go to work in those buildings that
Right.
make the reputation.
That's
and I
right.
used to joke when I had lots of, I said, look, no one's coming to a Lifespan hospital because I'm the CEO. No one.
Right.
But
Right.
my job is to create an environment where
Yeah.
you can work in such a way that you build the reputation. That my job is to enable you to be the best you can, because that's what creates the reputation. No,
Right.
no one's
That's
saying,
right.
send me to Lifespan because Babino's the CEO. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, it's a great topic, and we could talk about it all day. I think that, again, your slate of leaders was really impressive, and mixed perspectives and a lot of common themes. But hopefully we can keep the dialogue going nationally. Not so much about what degrees you have, but really about that topic, the importance of physician leadership, regardless of whether they're in the C-suite or not, but the relationship between those physicians and the C-suite. So I really appreciate you doing it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to do it. It was fun. It was really enjoyable. And I hope people watch all three. I think they'll get a sense of the passion these 6 leaders feel. Um, I tried to make it just kind of an informal fireside chat.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, these 6 leaders happen to be friends of mine as well, so it's pretty easy. And
That's
it
helpful.
was nice to
Yeah.
see them on video, and they love telling their story. And I think people will find them very interesting to watch. And I hope they watch all 3. And again, thank you for giving me the time to do this.
Of course. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
See you.